Good morning and welcome back to another Coriander Quilts Saturday. Did you guys hear the news? Moda Blockheads has kicked off just this past Wednesday with the announcement post over on the Moda blog. And our first block release is going to be this upcoming Wednesday, May 28th. So I know I am looking forward to another round of Moda Blockheads. I'm going to be sharing my plan for this upcoming round. I am also going to be sharing all of the new quilts for In the Garden, those new quilts that I've designed for that collection. So two fun things to share. And of course, we have some fun viewer quilts and a viewer question that I will be answering. So stick around. Let's chat first about this Moda Blockheads goodness. For those of you who might not be familiar with Moda Blockheads, this is the 6th round and I've participated in each round. I think I shared all of the quilts that I have made for Moda Blockheads in a video some time ago. So if I can find that, I'm going to link that in the description box below so you can see some of my previous Moda Blockheads quilts. The way Moda Blockheads works is for a set period of time, there is a block released every week on Wednesdays. These patterns are free. The fun part about Moda Blockheads is it's a little bit looser maybe than some other quilt-alongs that you've participated in. You can choose to make all of the blocks, some of the blocks. Some years there's different sized blocks. It's kind of a choose your own quilt adventure. So this year I am planning to not make all of the quilt blocks. I am going to be making, I think 13. If my plan comes to fruition, I only need 13 of the blocks. This is a shorter round. Sometimes Moda Blockheads has gone a full year. I think sometimes it's even been longer. This year, we're going to be wrapping up in the fall. So it's just a nice short little round. But also, since it's kicking off right in the summer months, I know that I am going to be busier outside than I am when quilt-alongs kick off in the winter months. So I'm doing a smaller quilt. I'm going to pick and choose the blocks as they come out as to whether I want to make one that week or not. And I can be a little choosy because I don't need all of the blocks. I only need 13, like I said. The fabrics that I'm using, I'm going to be using a bloom. You can see them all right here. These are also the fabrics I used in all of my backdrop quilts that are hanging right now. I loved making the quilts behind me and I'm looking forward to sewing with these fabrics again. So I'm going to be using a mix of the prints. I am also going to be sneaking in some of these cross-stitch panel squares because that is going to just kick it up a notch without me having to do a lot of extra works. It just adds a little bit of extra fun to my quilt. So I'm going to be sneaking that in. This is my rough plan right here. So all of these star blocks, now this is not one of the blocks, but wherever a star is, that's where I'm going to be using one of the Moda Blockheads blocks. And then in the alternate squares, I'm going to be bringing these up to size and using these in these spots here. So alternating panel squares with the Blockheads blocks to make a small throw-sized quilt. I haven't decided yet if I am adding borders or not, but it's just going to be a smaller quilt. It's not going to be anything too big, and it's going to be very doable for me over the summer months. So that's my current plan. We had to share a little bit on Saturday, the designers over on the Moda YouTube channel. And I mentioned in my little video clip that some years I am flying by the seat of my pants when I'm making my plans for Moda Blockheads. And other years I feel like I am well organized and have all of my ducks in a row. This year's a little bit of a mix. I came up with my plan very last minute, just this week. I actually had been thinking our kickoff was a little bit later, so I thought, oh, I have time to plan, but I did not have as much time as I thought I had. So I knew that I was going to have a busy summer, and so I threw together an idea that is going to be super cute, but also not a huge time investment. So that's my plan. Now you're going to find, if you have not participated in Moda Blockheads before, that there are different ways that you can choose to set your blocks. As I was saying, you can do some of the blocks, all of the blocks, multiples of blocks, and then create your own setting. But then there are multiple setting options that are released throughout Moda Blockheads, usually more towards the end of the sew along, if I recall. But so you can pick and choose, make this quilt very much your own and tailor it to what works best for you, which kind of sets the Blockheads program apart a little bit from other quilt alongs you might be familiar with. I will link to everything I can that's been released so far for this round of Moda Blockheads, and also to the Moda Blockheads Facebook group. The Facebook group is actually really neat because there's, I don't know, probably close to 80,000 quilters in that group, with a large participation of those members with each quilt along, and lots of sharing. So you see fabric pulls, you see blocks being made, you see quilts from previous rounds, all kinds of just quilt block inspiration, quilt inspiration, fabric inspiration over in that group. So if you are participating in Moda Blockheads, it's a great spot to also participate in to kind of see what's going on. So are you guys participating? Who already knew that Moda Blockheads was kicking off another round? Who is planning to participate? And which ones of you is this all new and you're excited for something new and exciting? Let us know in the comments. I always think it's fun. You guys know that I think it's fun to sew along. I enjoy the quilt alongs that I host. It's a great way to stay accountable and just feel like you're sewing with friends. You know, back in longer years ago, it used to be more common practice, I think, to get together maybe and sew, or get together and hand quilt, have your little, I don't know, we call them cluck parties. I don't know if anyone else calls them that or not, but little parties where you would get together and chat and do handwork. But I think we've kind of gotten away from that a little bit. But with the online world of quilting, it brings that all back as an option. You're not necessarily sewing in person, but you still get to sew together in a group. So I think it's a lot of fun. All right, so that is Moda Blockheads news. Before I forget, I also just wanted to mention the Barn Star that is $5 for this month. You have just one more week to get this for $5. So this pattern is available in my Etsy shop, but just for $5 for 1 week more. Next Saturday is already the last Saturday of May. So through next Saturday, $5 for this pattern, and then we'll switch to a new June pattern of the month. So I'll have this pattern linked in the description box below as well. And now let's go ahead and move on to some viewer quilt shares. I have 3 wonderful projects to share with you all today. Lynn L. says, Cori, I love your Saturday morning videos, and I was so excited to hear that you are sharing viewer quilts. This is my sampler quilt from the Riley Blake Challenge 2024 using your beautiful fabric line Sun Washed. I called it Sunny Days. Lynn quilted her Sunny Days quilt using the quilting pantograph Fern by Patricia Ritter. Next up, Ellie B shares, since oversized hot pads seem to be in right now, I have been making them for my sewing friends. I gave this one to my friend that loves old trucks. Thank you for the pattern. So the pattern that she used is just a portion of Roadside Harvest, which features a number of different fall themed quilting motifs, and she pulled out the little truck pattern from that, pulled out the truck block from that pattern to use for her little hot pad there. So cute. And then lastly, Deb W. sent in a beautifully charming quilt photo. She used the fabric Solana by Robin Pickens, and she says, I love seeing all of the varieties and looks from a quilt pattern. I quilted this quilt and donated it for a silent auction. So that is, again, the beautifully charming quilt pattern. That's a free pattern over on my blog, so I'll have that linked as well. So some really neat photo shares today. Thank you so much for sending those in, and thank you for those waiting in my line to get shared in future videos. I love looking at those, and so glad that you guys enjoy seeing them as well. All right, next we are going to move right into the In the Garden quilts that I designed for my In the Garden fabric line. These are In the Garden fabrics showing to quilt shops right now. They will be in shops next fall. So a little bit longer until we can get our hands on these and start sewing. I've chatted about these fabrics in the last 2 videos over the previous last 2 Saturdays. Last week talking about how these fabrics mix with Callie & Co. For those of you joining in on the Callie & Co. sew along, who might be wanting to add a few more fabrics to your leftovers from Callie & Co. or just mixing and matching for fun. I talked about that last week, and the week before I just primarily talked about the different prints in my upcoming In the Garden fabric line. And today it's all about the quilts. So before I share the quilt, I had not the quilt, I've got more than one quilt to share. I'm not sure how many I have, 5 or 6, several. I had a question that I thought tied in pretty nicely with what we're talking about, because it has to do with my quilter on my quilts. It comes to me from Margaret Lavinia. She says, how did you find Quilts by David? Were there not many local quilters available when you started using him to quilt? Has a quilt ever gotten lost? Have you gotten to meet him or just talk to him? She goes on to say, I use a local guild member to quilt my bigger quilts when I don't feel I can easily do it myself. She does a great job and I love talking to her. She even showed my grandson options for his quilting pattern when we dropped the quilt off that I made for him, so he was able to pick what he liked. I love your Saturday videos. You have been busy making new fabric designs this year. Has been a busy year, hasn't it? All right, so let's just answer some of these questions. How did you find Quilts by David? I found him on Instagram. I have found a number of great long arm quilters on Instagram. It's so nice when quilters share their work, or when other quilt makers that I am familiar with share and tag a quilter that they have really enjoyed working with. It's a great way to be able to locate a quilter that you know you are going to enjoy working with. She asks, were there not many local quilters available when you started using him to quilt? When I started making quilts, no, there was not a lot of long arm quilters. And in fact, long arm quilting was just sort of starting to come onto the scene. It was new, up and coming, and still where I lived in an Amish community, maybe even almost frowned upon at that point in time, because why would you send your quilt out when you would just be able to hand quilt it yourself? So that's kind of the background where I would have come from. I remember my mom was just aghast that I would send something out to be machine quilted rather than have it hand quilted. And so we had to ease in to the long arming. And really it's come so far in the amount of time that I have been making quilts. You know, there's just been so many advancements in what you can do now with machine quilting and the way people are approaching machine quilting and custom quilting. It's an art form in and of itself. So now not only do you have the art of creating the quilt top, you have almost a whole nother area of quilt making in the machine quilting, which is so neat to see. It's been really fascinating to see how far it's come over the last many years. Has a quilt ever gotten lost? I've never had a quilt get lost on the way to him or any of my other long arm quilters. And I've sent them further. I've sent them across the United States, depending on what quilter I'm using. So I've sent them far, so they've had to travel there and get back, and I've never had one get lost. She asked, have you gotten to meet David or just talk to him? I have met him in person. He's come to quilt markets that I've attended, so we've chatted in person. And that's her last question there. So I thought that was really interesting. And the quilts that you are going to be seeing are all quilted this batch by David. So you're going to get to see his work firsthand and kind of have a picture of the quilting that he does. And this is who she was asking about. So thank you for that question. I am going to go ahead and get everything kind of switched up here. I'm going to hang up one of my new In the Garden quilts, and we're just going to start talking about all of those new quilts. All of the In the Garden patterns that I'm releasing should be available to purchase in my Etsy shop by the time you are watching this video, and you would be able to purchase them in both paper and PDF formats. This first quilt that you are seeing is Fanciful, and it is a fat quarter friendly quilt. It uses 20 fat quarters. And it finishes at 75 by 93. So it's a nice roomy quilt. This would be a really easy one to add a border to if you wanted to enlarge it and make it even bigger than what it already is. I love this sort of scrappy vibe. And this background that I used is one that I mentioned in the fabric video that I thought was going to work so well for backgrounds. And I really do like the way that just adds a little pop of color to that sashing. I'm gonna pull that down. We're gonna look at this in more detail. I wanna show you the quilting, the bindings, the backing, all the good things. So here is Fanciful up close. And I love this quilting. This is the second time I think that David has used this quilting design on one of my quilts. I loved it the first time, and I think it's beautiful this time as well. It is such a traditional quilting design, but it is a little bit special. Kind of a rainbow, kind of a Baptist fan, a little bit of a clam, and I like it's a little more narrow and elongated. It's just a really pretty quilting design. It's called City of Fountains. It's by Julie Hurt. And whenever I chat about quilting in my trunk shows like this, I always make sure to link the information in the description box below for that quilting, so that if you also want to use City of Fountains on one of your quilts, you've got the information readily available. I think it really sets these larger blocks off nicely. These blocks finish at 15 inches square, so a nice roomy block. Now, speaking of the block size, let's take a look at the back of the quilt pattern before we move on. Just like with my previous patterns over the last couple years, I am including the quilting skills used on the back. This allows you to determine if a pattern is suitable for your skills. For Fanciful, what you are going to be needing to make and do is accurate 1/4 inch seam allowances, rotary cutting. You'll be making half square triangles, flying geese units, and square in a square units. So that just helps you decide if this is a pattern that will work for your skill set or not. And you will find this information in my listings over on Etsy. The whole back page is listed in with the photos of the quilt, so that you can easily see the yardage requirements, the size of the quilt, and then also those quilting skills that you will be using to make the quilt. So let's go ahead and take a look then at our quilt back. I used the large scale yellow print from In the Garden for my backing, and the binding is this beautiful stripe. You know I love a stripe for my binding. I know I'm not alone in this. Many of you, there haven't been very many fabric lines I've released that don't have a stripe, because I just feel it's such an essential need for those bindings. And you guys also comment when I don't have a stripe in my collection. Where's the stripe? We need the stripe for the bindings. I agree. I love having a stripe for those bindings. So it's a diagonal stripe in the Garden fabric line, so we can do those really pretty bias look bindings and still be able to cut our binding straight across the width of the grain, which I love doing. So that is a peek again at Fanciful. And now we are going to move to the quilt behind me. This quilt is called Brookside. A little bit of a smaller quilt than what we had with Fanciful, but again, another one that would be really easy to enlarge by adding an extra border or two if you wanted something larger. As it is, it finishes at 60 by 70, and this is a charm pack quilt. You know I often enjoy making charm pack quilts that are roomy in size. It's so nice when you can get one charm pack plus a little bit of extra yardage and end up with a quilt that is a nice size. Sometimes you want to make something small, but sometimes you want something big, more bang for your buck, and this one definitely does that. The quilting on this one is new. This was one that I hadn't used before. It has been catching my eye for I don't know how long. I've had it saved in my favorites over on Instagram, and I kept thinking, I want to use that sometime. And so let's take a look at that. I think it turned out beautifully. Look at that quilting. Isn't that so cute? I think you can see it best maybe on this portion of the quilt, at least on the front side. But it's just these little bubbles. I don't know, it reminds me a little bit of bubble wrap, I think. I just think it's so cute. I like the texture. I think it's an interesting quilting design. It's called Globes, and it is by So Shabby Quilting. I've been really enjoying a lot of her quilting designs. She's just had so many great ones. There was even 2 more that I added to my, hey, I really need to try this quilting design saved favorites of quilting. And she just has so many fun ones that I've just really been enjoying. But this is that same flutter print that I used on the sashing of the previous quilt, but this is just in the darker gray. And then this is another one of those prints that I can see myself using a lot. This is a little, it's called Tiny Peel. It's the sweetest little orange peel X's, and it gives just a little splash of color here and there. I love this print. I like it in all of the colors in the garden, but this white one is super versatile. So let's look at the back. We have the large scale on the dark gray, that large scale floral there, and then the stripe in the dark gray as well. So just a really fun charm pack quilt that finishes at a roomy size, 60 by 70. And let's look at the back of the pattern just a little bit. So to make this quilt, you're going to need an accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, rotary cutting, and you'll be making half square triangles. The fabric requirements pictured here, again, are also pictured and easily able to view over in my Etsy listing. I just think it's so nice to know what fabrics you need in advance of purchasing a pattern. Sometimes you already have everything you need, or if you want to purchase something to go with the pattern, it's nice if everything just kind of arrives at the same time, so you can just dive right into the making. So you'll always find that information in my listings. All right, we're going to move to the quilt behind me. It is a jelly roll quilt, and it's called Jelly Twinkle. Super scrappy and happy. You could easily make this from your scraps, but it works perfectly as a jelly roll quilt as well. It finishes at 64 by 76. And again, you could easily enlarge this by adding borders. Always the easiest ways to make quilts bigger would be to add additional blocks and or borders. To make quilts smaller, subtract blocks or take out borders. Those are the simplest ways to create a quilt in a size that works better for you without having to do a lot of math. Sometimes we just don't feel like doing a bunch of math. All right, I'm gonna take this one down so we can look at it. This is another quilting design that we've used previously, and I always like the way it turns out. So let's take a look at that. So the quilting on this one is called Swirly Foliage. It's another So Shabby quilting design, and just a really pretty swirl flower motif across the whole quilt. It adds great texture, and I love these little flowers that are thrown throughout, little leaves tossed in there. Just a really nice quilting design. It works great for a lot of different fabrics, and I think it worked really nicely for this quilt. The background white that I've used here is the white on white from the In the Garden fabric collection. It is the same print as this yellow right here or this color right here. Just gives a little bit of movement to those white spots. Moving to the back of the quilt, I used the aqua little, I've been calling this my pea pod print. It's not little pea pods, but it looks just like little peas on a pod. That doesn't sound like a very cute way to describe this print. It's a cute little print. It's actually called Sweet Pea because it reminds me of little pea pods. I just think it's cute. Definitely a fun little garden print. So that's the backing. We have the orange stripe again for the binding. As far as skills that you're going to need for Jelly Twinkle, this one, accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, rotary cutting, and flying geese units are what you are going to be spending your time doing if you are making this quilt. But just a fun, scrappy, you can see all of the colors that are in this quilt. The border is the beautiful large scale aqua from In the Garden, and it just beautifully frames out this quilt top. So another really fun one. And those jelly roll quilts are just fun to make. Moving behind me, we have Garden Melody. I knew that I wanted a flower themed quilt for this collection. So this is it, Garden Melody. This is a layer cake friendly quilt. It finishes at 68 by 76. And it is just perfectly springtime and just a really fun quilt. I love all of those flowers spread throughout. It almost looks like the flowers are in a field of green grass, just sort of popping up here and there. I took a recent trip down to South Carolina, and as we were driving down, they had these beautiful, on the interstate, sections of poppy-filled greenery. I'm losing my words, but poppy-filled sections as we were driving right along the interstate, and it was just so pretty, and this kind of reminds me of that a little bit. Lots of green and then just beautiful, colorful flowers smattered here and there. So the quilting on this one is one that I've used, I don't know how many times I've had David use this. It is just an orange peel, a simple orange peel. I don't think you can go too wrong with an orange peel on just about any quilt. The scale on this is especially nice. He did this in a really nice small scale. So let's take a peek at that. And you can see how much beautiful texture that orange peel adds to this quilt top. That scale is just perfect for this block size. The background here is again that little tiny orange peel. So that also works perfectly with the quilting. And it just gives it a little sparkle in the background. The leaves are actually that same print, but in the green. And it just beautifully frames out all of those colorful prints. The border on this quilt is green, in keeping with the sort of meadow theme of this quilt. And then we have the green stripe. For the backing, this little cute print, the little polka dot with the little tossed flowers, makes a beautiful backing. We'll take a look at the back pattern side of Garden Melody. So 68 by 76 is where this quilt finishes. Again, it's a layer cake quilt. And then your quilting skills used: accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, rotary cutting, stitch and flip corners, and square in a square blocks. I will tell you, this quilt does have a lot of stitch and flip corners. So if that's something that you're intimidated by, this is your chance to practice up, because by the time you're done with this quilt, you will have made quite a few of them. And then these blocks are all 8-inch blocks. So they're just the cutest little things. When I made my test block and stuck it up on my design wall, I thought, you are just the cutest little flower. And just some little adorable flowers. So that is Garden Melody. And then we've got Barn Star 11 hanging behind me. So this is the Barn Star for this pattern release. A nice big oversized Ohio star with a little bit of pizzazz added to it. As with all of my other Barn Stars in this series, this quilt finishes at 40 inches square, making it a really nice wall hanging, table topper, baby quilt sized. And I know a lot of you like taking multiple Barn Stars and sewing them together to make a larger quilt. So that is always an option. We'll take a look at this one up close as well. The quilting on this one is Infinity 1. It's another So Shabby quilting design, and another one that has been used more than once. It gives great texture, kind of almost a swirling, wind-blown look, with just a really texture-filled quilting design. The orange stripe. And then that beautiful aqua print with the polka dots for the backing. The binding is that little tiny orange peel in the light gray. In looking at the back of the pattern, you're going to see that you will need rotary cutting, accurate 1/4 inch seam allowance, and you'll be making 1/4 square triangles to make this quilt. So there is a peek at Barn Star 11. Another fun one to add to that roundup of Barn Stars If you're collecting my Barnstar patterns, you now have another one to add to your collection. So that is the last of the new quilt patterns that I've designed for this collection. There is still one more new quilt pattern that I've designed for something fun that I'll be talking about in more detail a little bit later. But these are the new ones that you will find in my Etsy shop right now. If you have any questions about any of the new patterns, please feel free to leave those in the comments below so that we can get those questions answered for you. I always enjoy sharing the new patterns with you, and I'm always curious which one of the new patterns might be your favorite, or maybe which one you were initially drawn to. So be sure and let me know that below. Thank you so much for stopping by. I will catch you again next time.